What's up, YouTube, and welcome in, Bears fans. This is the Lindemann Show, and I'm your host, Cody Lindemann. Today, we are going to be talking about the updated tiers list from last week. We talked about how the Bears head coaching candidates line up in tiers with more new candidates. We're going to revisit the tiers list and talk a little bit more about that. And we're going to be talking about a pair of candidates that look like they could be front runners or still have a very good chance at landing the head coaching job for the Chicago Bears. Before we get into that, would like to welcome each and every one of you to the program. Thank you for joining me today. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Really appreciate all of your time and any kind words you have in the comments or any not so kind words. Leaving a comment, always great, and then I can maybe address it in future shows. And always appreciate your like. That support is super easy. Just one button down there below the video. All right, so let's get right into it. The Bears head coaching candidate organized into tiers. Last week, if you remember, Ben Johnson and Mike Vrabel were in the A tier. That's the top tier, the most sought after candidates. Mike Vrabel, obviously, since the last time we talked, has been hired by the Patriots, so he is no longer available, which means Ben Johnson is the only person left in the A tier. He is far and away the front runner to land the best and most opportune job. There's really no one who's close to him, in my opinion, and I think that's the prevailing opinion around the National Football League. It opens up a really interesting door for Ben Johnson because it is likely, in my opinion, that the Lions make a late playoff run. And if you're waiting for the top coaching candidate to be that first, or I guess in this case, second domino to fall before other jobs line up, you could be waiting until February. And that means the Bears could be waiting until February. It means the rest of the league could be waiting until February. That's a very interesting situation unfolding when there is one top candidate that appears to be out above the rest. Obviously, he's offensive-minded head coach as the offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions and has had one of the most efficient offenses over the last 3 years. That is obviously why he is one of the most sought-after candidates. So in the A tier, not much changing except that Mike Vrabel is no longer available, so he is no longer considered part of that tier. The B tier also remains unchanged. In the B tier, we had Brain Flores. I hope the Bears get him in the building this week. We're going to talk more about him later in the program. Aaron Glenn, who is the defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. So both Lions coordinators high on the list for potential Bears head coaches. And then Todd Monken, who is also an offensive-minded head coach possibility as the offensive coordinator of the Baltimore Ravens. In the C tier also remains the same. Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills, is still there, and of course so is Pete Carroll, who was in the C tier last week. D tier is where things finally change. Last week we had Mike McCarthy there, and last week it was unclear if he was going to be a real possibility of a candidate, as his interview request had been blocked by the Cowboys. The Bears were unable to interview him at that time. Of course, things have changed as Mike McCarthy has officially parted ways with the Dallas Cowboys, and another head coaching vacancy has opened up. And where we see the change, Ron Rivera, who interviewed with the Bears already. He is new to the list. We didn't have him in the tier list last week. He also is in the D tier. These are coaches. Both these coaches have head coaching experience, have some success. They both are a little bit older and seem like they haven't had much success head coaching as of late. When you look at Mike McCarthy and Dallas, Ron Rivera obviously not leading up any National Football League team at the moment. So that is why both of these experienced coaches are in the D tier. Pete Carroll also kind of fits that bill. He's also kind of in the same boat. But Pete Carroll is in the C tier. He just seems like he has had more success, even though he hasn't currently been leading a team. His longevity as a Seahawks head coach, I think, really speaks to his ability to coach. And it's only one difference of a tier, right? Pete Carroll is in the C tier, and Mike McCarthy and Ron Rivera are both in the D tier. And then the E tier, the second to last one, is where we see 3 more names added. Last week we had Anthony Weaver, Matt Campbell, Arthur Smith, and this week we add Marcus Freeman, Cliff Kingsbury, and Adam Stenvinich. I believe that's how you say it. The Packers offensive coordinator. It was just announced within the past few days that the Bears have requested to interview him. So he also makes the list. Once again, both college coaches that the Bears are interested in talking with are in this tier. I made it clear last week, and I'll reiterate with the adding of Marcus Freeman, that I do not want the Bears to hire a college head coach. I really question whether or not that coach will be able to, obviously command a room. Both those coaches are pretty young, and I don't really trust their ability to make the jump into the NFL or to build a coaching staff filled with NFL experience with their time in the NCAA in college. I think it'll be a difficult jump, and I think with the Bears looking for a leader, looking to be coached harder, maybe Matt Campbell and Marcus Freeman are not great choices at this time. I'd rather have someone who has had success in the NFL, but maybe not head coaching success is not a prerequisite. Obviously, it's nice, but the top name, Ben Johnson, doesn't have that. Aaron Glenn, Todd Monken both fall under the bill of not having head coaching experience in the NFL, but having experience in the NFL and having successful coaching time in the NFL. Moving on to Cliff Kingsbury. He does have some experience as a head coach. Just the way things unfolded in Arizona, I just don't have a lot of trust in Cliff Kingsbury. Maybe, in the next head coaching cycle or next 2 or 3, I think maybe he'll be a big name, but I think right now, where he's at, maybe he just wants to get reestablished after what happened in Arizona and how things did not end well there. And then the Green Bay offensive coordinator, Adam Stenavich, not getting a lot of fire or not getting a lot of heat attention in this head coaching cycle. I really think Matt LaFleur runs the offense up there, so I don't have a lot of faith in that head coach to come over here and work out. Coming from a system where he hasn't play called, it seems like the head coach really runs the offense. To come over here, implement your own offense, and then on top of that, be a head coach, seems like a far cry from what the Bears really need at this point and the kind of coach that they should be looking for. And then in the F tier, there are no new names, but just to review from last week, it is David Shaw, Thomas Brown, who did interview with the Bears officially, Drew Petzing, and Mike Teafa. All are in the bottom tier. Not very impressed with the resumes of any of them. But one thing I thought was interesting when redoing or revamping this tiers list is the names of coaches who have not yet interviewed with the Bears. So I'm going to go over them now. Brain Flores, obviously he was not able to because his team was in the playoffs. I hope that changes this week, like I said. I hope by the end of the week the Bears meet with Brain Flores and see what he has to say and get him in for an interview now that the Vikings have been eliminated from the playoffs. Todd Monken, also another name that has not been interviewed yet. His team's in the playoffs, and Joe Brady is in the same case as Todd Monken. His team is still currently in the playoffs and will probably make a deep run. I guess one of those two guys has to become available after this week to interview, so you can start working on that next week if you're the Bears. But this is where things really got interesting for me, is beyond that. When you look at names of people you think the Bears have had time to interview and have not yet, Matt Campbell hasn't been interviewed. The Cyclone season's been over for a couple weeks. I would have liked to have him interviewed by now. Arthur Smith, obviously he just got eliminated from the playoffs, but I would have liked to at least learn that the Bears had something scheduled. The only person that I know the Bears have a head coach or have a scheduled interview with is Mike McCarthy. They'll be interviewing on the day that this is released. So that's the only scheduled head coaching interview that I've heard of as of late. So once again, Matt Campbell and Arthur Smith, I wish Matt Campbell would have been interviewed a while ago. Arthur Smith, I wish he would have been interviewed this week. I wish that would have been talked about more. Marcus Freeman, obviously that makes sense that you're not going to be interviewing him as he's en route to a national championship game with Notre Dame. I mean, if he's willing to interview, I think you should throw it out there and ask, but I highly doubt he would be interested in taking any interviews when he's gearing up for probably the most important game of his coaching career. Cliff Kingsbury, obviously, they're in Washington, not going to be able to interview with the Commanders winning in the final seconds there, scoring a touchdown, and then they kicked a field goal, I think, to win the game. Doinked it off the post, so that was just insulting to the Bears in so many different ways with Dan Quinn as the coach and Jaden Daniels at quarterback, and then dinking it off the post and in to win the game with a field goal is salt in an open wound of what is one of the most disappointing Bears seasons in a long time. Adam Stenavich, the offensive coordinator for the Packers, I would have hoped that he was at least scheduled. There was at least some steam heading in that direction. I really haven't heard anything besides the Bears have requested to interview him, and I wish there would have been more movement in that way. And then David Shaw, the executive for the Broncos, I believe. He is in the F tier of this head coaching candidate list. I don't believe he's a very serious head coaching candidate, but I would have hoped that they would have interviewed him, gotten it out of the way, and then you don't have to worry about bringing him in for an interview later. Same thing for the offensive coordinator of the Packers. I wish that there would have been more steam, like I said, and that it was notable that the Bears were checking people off the list of people they wanted to interview. And what really worries me is that most of them are lower tier guys. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys who are in the bottom 2 tiers of my head coaching candidate list. And then there's only 1, 2, 3 in the B and C tier who have not been interviewed thus far. And that is mostly because they've been in the playoffs until Monday for Brain Flores when he was eliminated from the playoffs. So hopefully the Bears can move forward with interviews with Brain Flores, Adam Stenavich, and Arthur Smith. Hopefully they knock those interviews out here with the end of the week into the weekend and early next week, and then get set to interview Todd Monken or Joe Brady as the Ravens and the Bills face off. One of those two will be available to interview after this weekend and Sunday Night Football. One thing I did mention, I did zero in on Matt Campbell and Marcus Freeman. Both the college coaches said I don't want a college coach. But what I do like is that they look like the right choices for college coaches. What I mean is that they both have really transformed the program. Matt Campbell, as an Iowa State fan, I'm a big fan of his. I remember before he came to the program, if the Cyclones made a bowl, that was a good year for the Cyclones. And now it's more of what bowl are the Cyclones making and how high is it? And obviously this year having a really good year competing for the Big 12 championship, as they have in a couple other seasons, or one other year, I believe, under Matt Campbell's leadership. And Marcus Freeman, obviously a good name. He's really turned around the Fighting Irish program there in South Bend and has led his team this year to fight for a national championship. And as an independent, there's also something to be said for that. Obviously, he gets some big games, but really needing to take care of business as they have since the loss to Northern Illinois. Really seems like his players buy into what he sells and to his mantra there, his leadership style. So all really good. So I do like that part of the head coaching aspect, or identifying head coaching candidates, that they picked what I believe are two of the top college head coaching candidates to move to the NFL. But as that's going to kind of wrap up the tier update. Once again, I want to remind you to like, subscribe, leave a comment down in the comment section. Love to see what you guys have to say down there and interact with you, and maybe bring up a topic that you mentioned down there in the next episodes. Anything you want to see added to or changed in the program, please feel free to leave a comment, and I appreciate any likes that you can hit. It's a really easy way to support what I do and support the channel. Just tap that like button, and really love any subscribers that I have. Appreciate your guys' continued commitment to watch the show and to the Chicago Bears. Please leave a comment and critique my tier list. Tell me how it's wrong. Tell me how it's right, and tell me who you want to be the next Bears head coach. And speaking of the next Bears head coach, I want to talk about two names that have been picking up a lot of steam and have kind of been front runners, in my opinion, for the Bears job as it stands, that are not named Ben Johnson. So that would be Mike McCarthy, as he parted ways with the Cowboys, picked up a lot of steam moving towards the Bears job. And the name that ESPN is predicting will be the Bears' next head coach at this point in time, Brain Flores, the defensive coordinator for the Vikings. Just before we launch into them, though, there was some rumors about maybe Mike Tomlin being traded for. That would have been probably too high of a cost for the Bears when you look at where they need to add to the offensive line and how they need to really utilize first-round picks for the next couple of years to protect Caleb Williams and build in the trenches, which they've failed to do under the leadership of Ryan Poles. It also is noting that when Tomlin was hired, possibly one of the most successful coaches in the modern era, probably is, in my opinion, he wasn't considered one of the top candidates. So let that be just a little beacon of light. If the Bears hire someone who you consider not to be a top candidate, maybe they'll be the next Mike Tomlin. You just never know. But any of those rumors that I talked about with Tomlin, with trading for, even though I thought it was a ridiculous idea, if you still thought there was a chance, Tomlin met the media on Tuesday, and he said that he was not going anywhere. So any ideas or thoughts of that were discontinued pretty quickly, and that will not be happening. So if you were worried about that and you thought the capital was too high to get him, or you were excited about that, sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but it does not look like Mike Tomlin will be leaving the Pittsburgh area. Now to hop into those two names that I mentioned at the top of this segment, let's jump in with Mike McCarthy first. Obviously, it was announced Monday that him and the Dallas Cowboys would not be coming to a resolution on contract extensions and negotiations, and that he would become a free agent. That immediately made him probably the most qualified head coaching candidate in the pool. Like I said, I think Ben Johnson is still the favorite, but as far as sustained success in the NFL, Mike McCarthy is definitely the top candidate. In his 18 years of head coaching experience, which 18 years of head coaching experience is enough to make him the most qualified, in my opinion. But when you look at his numbers, he's won 174 games and lost 112 games. He is 11-11 in the playoffs. So 500, not a great record in the playoffs, but he's also won 11 playoff games. So you have to make some runs and go deep in some seasons to win 11 playoff games, and that's certainly nothing to scoff at when you're looking at hiring a new head coach, someone who has, played a combined 22 games in the playoffs. That's somewhere that obviously the Bears hope to be. They hoped they were there this season. They were far from it. They probably hope to be there next season if they can have a decent free agency and hit on a couple draft picks. And Mike McCarthy would definitely be someone who's had experience there. He obviously can command a locker room. So there's a lot of good that can come from Mike McCarthy being the Bears head coach, even though he's pretty low on my tier list. There's some people out there saying the Bears can't afford to wait until February. I mentioned that at the top of the show. They can't afford to wait until February to hire a head coach. That's what hiring Ben Johnson would probably entail, looking at the trajectory of the Lions season and how I think they'll fare in the playoffs. Some people are saying the Bears can't wait. You can't wait that long. And I think the Bears can't afford to not wait, right? That's a double negative, right? But what I'm saying is I think the Bears shouldn't I'm trying to figure out how to say this without it being a double negative. But if you're the Bears, what you can't do is settle for a head coaching candidate and not go after the top guy simply because you have to wait. I think that is backwards thinking. I think it's playing it too safe. If you're the Bears and you have a franchise quarterback for the first time in several years, maybe in the franchise's history, you have a quarterback that is uber talented, who, with a little bit of coaching, can be a top quarterback in the NFL. You can't afford to get a coach that you think is not as good as the person you want simply because you would have to wait to get the person you want. Right? Obviously, talking about the Ben Johnson, Mike McCarthy situation. I think that the people who say you can't wait till February to get the top guy are thinking backwards. That you have to play it safe and get a coach that you think is not as good simply because you could miss out on the top candidate. I don't think that's right. I think that puts the Bears in a dangerous situation. I think it sets the Bears up for mediocrity instead of long-term success. If you're the Bears, you make weird coaching decisions far too often. Go get the guy who you think is going to be the best head coach in this coaching cycle, who you think can assist Caleb Williams throughout his career, and who you think can make him the best version of a quarterback that he can be and can lead this team to deep playoff runs year after year after year, which you've seen in places, obviously, like Kansas City. The Bills have done it. The Bengals have the ability to do it, didn't do it this year. Aaron Rodgers did it throughout his career. There's a few examples of it. Ben Roethlisberger is a great one in Pittsburgh there with Tomlin. There's few examples of it, but if you have the ability to do it, or you think you have the opportunity, you should pursue that with all you can. I'm not saying don't interview other people, don't assume that you're going to land Ben Johnson, but I'm saying you can't be out on the top head coaching candidate simply because you might lose what I consider to be a mediocre or a couple of mediocre candidates. I think Brain Flores will likely be interested. And another thing to consider when you think about that is Ben Johnson is the top head coaching candidate for a lot of these teams. So a lot of these teams might be waiting for him to test the waters of the free agency coaching market or to make his decision before they then go and make decisions. Obviously, things can change. But if you're the Bears, you can't play it safe, in my opinion. But you also don't want to let everyone else pick top coaches and then not get Ben Johnson, because that is the worst case scenario. I think the second worst case scenario is playing it safe and missing out on the top head coaching candidate. He goes off somewhere else and makes that team perennial playoff contenders. Another thing that is really interesting about Mike McCarthy and the interview he's having with the Bears on Wednesday, on the day this is released, The reports that I'm hearing is that it's a meeting in person, and that he will be in the building with the Bears, or at least they will be meeting in person, and that is a big escalation in the Bears interviewing process. Thus far, first round interviews, I mean, even with Thomas Brown, have only been virtual. So this is still considered a first round interview with Mike McCarthy. It is his first interview with the team, and it is said to be in person. So that definitely bears some watching. It seems like the Bears are very interested in Mike McCarthy if they're going to change the way they've been interviewing, specifically for him. Maybe it's ease of access. I've heard that he still has a home in Green Bay, apparently. So maybe it's just, he can drive down from Wisconsin and be there quite easily. So that's why they are having an in-person interview. Maybe he's on his way back to his home in Green Bay. Who knows? But it certainly looks like an escalation from the Bears side, and it looks like they are definitely very interested in Mike McCarthy. Last thing about McCarthy is that there's been, since Monday, a lot of steam in the Chicago media about McCarthy. They've been talking about McCarthy nonstop. So does the media know something? Do they believe McCarthy is the next head coach? Obviously, it's speculation on my part, but it wouldn't be the first time that the media has some insight into a team's thinking before the general public does, or before they are ready to expose that to the general public. And then moving on to Brain Flores, just to kind of hit on it before we wrap up the show here. Flores obviously has had some on-field success with the defense playing absolutely great in Minnesota. Obviously, a knock against him is that he is a defensive head coach, so doesn't have that offensive pedigree that the Bears you think would be really interested in and would be leaning into, with Caleb Williams, their young quarterback, being top of mind, being top priority for the team. Another positive, but also negative for Brain Flores, is he does have previous head coaching experience. Obviously was the coach with the Dolphins for 3 years. In that time, he went 24-25, so just under 500. And another negative against him is truly a negative, is that he has open lawsuits against the league, against the NFL. So if you hire him as a head coach, you're probably going to have to answer to some other owners asking about why you're hiring the person who's suing the league. I don't know if that really fits the McCaskies. I've heard some people say that maybe that's not something the McCaskies would be interested in. And also Brain Flores, why I said it was a negative that he's a head coach. Obviously, he didn't have a winning record, but also there has been a lot of reporting about how bad the relationship between him and Tua got at the end of his time in Miami, and how things kind of deteriorated. Obviously, he doesn't have the experience that Mike McCarthy has, but has proven to be a good head coach. And has proven to be a good head coach, and has shown that he is more than capable of leading a team, commanding a locker room, and obviously, winning some games as a head coach. There is some discussion and debate left to be had if he can develop a young quarterback. He's obviously worked with a young quarterback and made some mistakes, had some failures there in Miami. You know what they say, though? You learn more from mistakes than you do from success. So maybe that is a good thing that he's failed with a young quarterback. I don't think many Chicago Bears fans would agree. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but it is something that you could defend his past head coaching incident with, and that he didn't do great as a head coach, but he could learn from that as well. So that is going to wrap up the show for today. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Want to encourage you to, once again, leave a comment about who you want to be the Bears' next head coach. Tell me about my tiers list, why you want McCarthy or Flores, or why you don't want them to be the next head coach. Comment, subscribe. I really appreciate anyone who takes time to listen. And I want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. So until next time, for the Lindemann Show, I am Cody Lindemann, signing off.